of the 2020 Tribal EPA Region 9 conference here. We're going to talk about the Bishop Paiute tribe working with the state of California in the listing of Bishop Creek, the 303D listing of Bishop Creek. And I can imagine if that we were all together, many of us would be hopping on the road to get home to our families. So it's nice to see all 37 of you here in the meeting. So this is a pre-recorded presentation, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining
us. My name is Ed Hancock. I am an environmental scientist with the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board. I have been working along with my colleague Cindy Wise with Brianna Vaughan, who is the Water Quality Program Coordinator for the Bishop Paiute tribe. And we are going to go through this presentation together. So I will be talking on some and Brianna will be talking on some others. We are really presenting to you our work to address the impaired waters of Bishop Creek. And that is a picture of South Lake, which is one of the headwater lakes of Bishop Creek. I highly recommend a visit there if you're ever in the area. It is beautiful, even more so than the picture suggests. So next slide, please. So here is an overview of today's presentation. We're going to talk about the partners, which is the Water Board and the Bishop Paiute tribe. We'll discuss the place, which is the Bishop Creek watershed, which is found in Inyo County, Eastern California. We'll talk about the problem, which is a water quality impairment because of fecal bacteria. And then we will touch on the process that we are going through to address this issue, which is a vision project. And I will explain what a vision project is a little later in the presentation. So next slide. So as I mentioned several times, the partners are the Water Board and the Paiute tribe. The Paiute tribe actually were the first to notice a water quality issue in Bishop Creek, and they alerted the Water Board. The Water Board was then able to direct some sampling resources to the watershed to really determine the extent of the water quality problem. But before we get into specifics, the next couple of slides will just give a little bit of information about the region that we work in and the Water Board organization and the project area as well. So next slide. So there are actually 9 regional water boards in the state of California, and each is defined by overarching hydrology. The regional water boards are under the umbrella of the State Water Resources Control Board, and together these organizations regulate ground and surface water quality in the state of California. The Lahontan region, which is also known as Region 6 and is on the right-hand side of the map that you can see, spans most of Eastern California from the Modoc Plateau at the Oregon border in the north down to the Mojave Desert in the south. The region is approximately 560 miles long and covers approximately 33,000 square miles, or 20% of the state. The next slide.
The Lahontan region includes over 700 lakes, 3,100 miles of streams, and over 1,500 square miles of groundwater basins. The region has the only ONRWs in the state, which are outstanding national resource waters, and these are Mono Lake and Lake Tahoe. The region is also home to the highest and lowest places in the contiguous US. That is, Mount Whitney is the highest, Death Valley is the lowest. And really, I want to paint a picture that there is lots of diversity and many unique ecosystems here in Eastern California.
So how is water quality regulated in the Lahontan region? Well, there is a guiding document known as a basin plan, the cover of which is pictured on this slide. The basin plan contains information on beneficial uses and water quality objectives to protect those uses, as well as other regional plans and policies which govern the regulation of surface and groundwater in the region. In the case of Bishop Creek, the basin plan contains information about the beneficial uses which apply to the creek, those water quality objectives that are set to protect those uses, and there are a mixture of narrative and numeric objectives for Bishop Creek, as well as several site-specific objectives which have been developed specifically to protect the Bishop Creek watershed. So next slide. So let's talk a little bit more about Bishop Creek. The watershed is located at the northern end of Inyo County. You can see on the little inset map there on the slide, roughly the area of California we're talking about. And the watershed spans about 129,000 acres. The creek is the largest tributary to the Owens River, and the watershed is a gateway to the eastern Sierra Nevada. The headwaters area is largely undeveloped and is extensively used for recreation, including fishing, hiking, horseback riding, camping, and such. In the middle portions of the creek, on the alluvial fan above the valley floor, there are a series of powerhouses that generate hydropower. And on the valley floor, which is the area of green, yellow, and red in the top right of the slide, residential, agricultural, and urban uses are intermixed. The city of Bishop itself is a popular tourist destination and is an important stop for hikers on the Pacific Crest Trail. So next slide. So let's talk about the project area, which is pictured here. The project area spans about 4,000 acres, 875 of which belong to the Bishop Paiute tribe, which is a little over 20% of the project area. The yellow area on this map is the Paiute Reservation, and the red area to its right is the city of Bishop. To the west of the reservation, so to the left, there are several substantial residential neighborhoods, as well as several grazing leases. And actually, this section of Bishop Creek, as you can see from the map, flows in two distinct channels, which are known locally as the North Fork and the South Fork. They are actually grouped together as one water body segment because of the highly similar land uses which surround them. In the project area, the land uses, as I said, are mixed amongst each other, with residential areas butting up against grazing allotments and horse pasture. Urban development is also present to support the communities in the area, and recreational opportunities such as fishing and swimming exist throughout the reach. Much of the water flowing in the lower reaches of Bishop Creek is actually exported south to Los Angeles, and the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, or LADWP, is responsible for water delivery from the watershed. Although they are not pictured explicitly on this map, there are many, many irrigation ditches throughout the study area which deliver water for agricultural purposes and for a phenomenon known as residential ornamental irrigation. The irrigation ditches, both for ag uses and for residential backyard watering, connect each branch of the creek to the other at a variety of locations, which actually makes dealing with a water quality problem that much more challenging. So now I'm going to pass the presentation over to Brianna, who again is the water quality coordinator for the tribe, and she will talk a little bit about the tribe's water quality program and how the tribe uncovered the water quality issue. So Brianna, over to you.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to start off giving a background on the Bishop Paiute Tribe's water quality monitoring program. In 1998, the Bishop Paiute Tribe's Water Quality Control Program was established. This was 1 year after the tribe established its Environmental Management Office. In 2006, EPA granted the tribe TAS, or treatment in a similar manner as a state, under Clean Water Act 518E. This is for the purposes of administering Clean Water Act Section 303C and Section 401 permitting authority. In 2007, the Water Quality Control Program staff developed water quality standards for the tribe, and these were approved by both EPA and the Tribal Council. Currently, our program is funded using EPA Clean Water Act Sections 106, which is the monitoring program, Section 319, which is our non-point source management program, and Section 104, which is our wetlands program, in addition to a current multi-purpose funding grant. This allows us to do additional non-point source projects. So as Ed said, the Bishop Paiute Reservation is 875 acres. Here's a map of it, and basically I clipped off anything external to the reservation, but you can see that the North Fork and the South Fork both enter the reservation on the west side of the map, and the North Fork exits the reservation on the northeast section of the map, and the South Fork exits the reservation in the kind of central east section of the map. Both of the forks equal about 2 linear miles in length through the reservation. We also have 8 irrigation ditches that flow through the reservation. Some of these are flow-through ditches and not intended for irrigating tribal lands. However, we do still sample them as they are open and considered surface waters of the reservation. You can see in the central eastern section of the reservation the blue dots with the bright green dots over them. Those are our pond sites. And so we do have 2 ponds located in our wetlands area as well. So looking at the legend, you can see the white dots are we call them our main or continuous monitoring sites, and those are located on the North and South Fork as the waters enter the reservation and the waters exit the reservation. We have continuous water quality monitors at each of these sites, and they collect 5 water quality parameters at 30-minute intervals, which in a year adds up to over 350,000 data points. We also have non-point source monitoring sites. These are the yellow dots on the map, and you can see those within the entrance and the exit of each of the forks of Bishop Creek. And we also collect bacteria samples just as we do at our main sites as well. And during the irrigation season, we collect 5 bacteria samples at each of these sites every 30 days so that we can calculate a geometric mean. And outside of irrigation season, we collect 1 sample at each of these sites per month. Irrigation season for the Bishop Paiute tribe goes from April 1st to October 31st. And then our pond sites are monitored in a similar manner. Ever since realizing that we have bacteria exceedances on the reservation, we have also started monitoring our irrigation ditches, and you can see those monitoring sites in these small orange dots on the map. These next couple slides are going to show some examples of some non-point source projects that the Water Quality Control Program has worked on to lessen the amount of bacteria that goes into the creek. So this is a field that gets irrigated every year, and what you can't see very well in this picture is the South Fork of Bishop Creek goes down and to the left of the image right here, and so it makes it really hard for the irrigation waters to continually flow into the field that is, this picture is looking to the east. And so ideally the water would like to kind of go around the tractor and into that field right there. But it was going into the creek instead, which is something that we never like to see. And so what we did was we installed what we call a tailwater berm, where we put in a whole bunch of dirt and rocks, and we used a vibrating compactor to compact that down. And you can see this is one of the first times that we had turned the irrigation valve on and let the irrigation water run in the creek. And we've been able to keep the water, tailwater, in this field and out of the creek since we started this project in 2003. Prior to us starting this project, the individual who was grazing cattle in this area had tried to actually dig kind of like a little trench or ditch parallel to the creek to direct the water to go not into the creek but down the field more. And because the cattle had access to the creek as well, they would continually punch out that ditch and it would just make the water go back into there. So it was a continual fight for him. So this has been a successful project that has lasted through the years. Here are some examples of a cattle exclusion fencing project that we've done on the South Fork of Bishop Creek within the reservation. You can see in this picture that we put up the fence, and it has, approximately a 10-foot buffer to the creek. And we're hoping that this will not only keep the cattle out, but also allow for a healthy riparian vegetation to grow right in this area. Here's another picture of an area that's upstream of the one that we just showed, kind of showing the buffer. And you can imagine here that once the cattle were kept out, the vegetation was able to thrive. However, we still have thirsty cattle. So if you keep them away from the creek, how are you going to provide them with water? Well, this was our new water quality control program fence building crew. And these two actually led the charge for designing and building this fence. They did have some help doing it, but you can see that the irrigation ditch that they're standing in front of is now fenced, and so the cattle couldn't get directly into this irrigation ditch. Was really important. It lessened the bank erosion and potential bacteria inputs from the cattle as well. It's a little difficult to see from this picture, but what we did, this is looking perpendicular to the picture that was taken before, and so the irrigation ditch actually flows from the left-hand side of the picture to the right-hand side of the picture. And what you're looking at is the posts of the fence, the near ones on one side of the creek and the far ones on the other side of the creek. And what we did is we strung barbed wire around it, as you could see in the picture before. But in this section where you can see the lower and kind of eroded area, this is where the cattle used to walk in all the time. And so they were really used to walking into this section. So what we did is, from the post that you see directly in front on the left and the right, we actually tied them in to the posts on the other side so that there was a slight V. And this made it so only their heads could get in and get water. So they could put their front hooves in and they could put their head in to get water, but they couldn't put their rear end in unless they really just backed up to it. And they'd really have to try to do that. But it also made it so it lessened the bacteria inputs and the erosion from the cattle.
Brianna. So yeah, as you can see, it's a somewhat perplexing problem with different years are better in terms of E. coli. There's not always a link with flow. Sometimes cattle are present, sometimes not. Well, first, let me apologize for the busyness of this slide. I was going to give you an overview of how this water quality problem timeline has evolved and how the Water Board and the tribe have begun to work together. So as we heard before, in 2010, the tribe alerts the Water Board that there are elevated levels of E. coli in both forks of Bishop Creek that run through their property. And in 2011, we begin screening, sampling, and we quickly realized that there was a concerning water quality problem because of fecal pollution. And obviously that has implications for human health. So from 2011 to 2017, we deployed an extensive diagnostic sampling program to really better characterize the issue. During this time, Water Board staff collected both fecal coliform and E. coli samples side by side, and the University of California research staff working under contract with the Water Board collected samples for microbial source tracking, or MST, genetic testing, and really that was to help determine the sources of fecal bacteria. So during this period of diagnostic sampling, the Water Board also convened a series of meetings with the jurisdictional entities in the watershed, including the Paiute tribe, but also the Inyo County Water Department, county public health officials, the City of Bishop, LADWP, etc. And the purpose of these meetings really was to communicate that there was a human health risk tied to fecal bacteria in the creek, and secondly, to determine or begin to determine a path forward to protect public health and to improve water quality in Bishop Creek. So beginning in, I would say, mid-2017, the Water Board began to notify interested parties in the watershed that Bishop Creek would very likely be in addition to the 303D list during the approaching assessment cycle, and that because of this, the Water Board was preempting the listing and taking steps to address the bacteria water quality issue. And this really was the beginning of this project. And it was at this time that my colleague Cindy Wise and I began actively working with Brianna and the tribe to come up with strategies to deal with this issue. So over this same period, so 2017 to about 2019, the Water Board finalized the water quality assessments for Bishop Creek, and in November 2019, the Regional Water Board approved the recommendation to place the creek on the 303D list. So this Regional Board recommendation is currently up for review by the State Water Resources Control Board and by US EPA, and both organizations are expected to finalize the listing and make it official later this fall in 2020. So next slide, please.
I want to talk for a moment about the state-administered bacteria water quality objectives that apply to Bishop Creek, mainly because there are two different objectives based on two different indicator bacteria for portions of Bishop Creek that the state of California is responsible for, as well as the objective that is administered by the tribe for the portions of Bishop Creek that flows on tribal lands. Let me be clear, this slide only depicts the water quality objectives that apply to state of California surface waters, and these objectives do not apply to the sovereign tribal lands also in California. So the first objective in effect for Bishop Creek is found in the Lahontan Region Basin Plan and uses fecal coliform as the indicator bacteria. This objective was written to apply generally to all surface waters and all beneficial uses in the Lahontan region. The second objective for bacteria that applies to Bishop Creek was recently adopted by the State Water Board and specifically protects the water contact recreation beneficial use, which is also known as REC 1, and protects this beneficial use in all state of California surface waters, including Bishop Creek. The E. coli objective uses E. coli as the indicator bacteria and is analogous to the US EPA 2012 recreational water quality criteria. Because the E. coli objective only applies to the Rec 1 or water contact recreation beneficial use, and the fecal coliform objective is of general applicability in the Lahontan region, both objectives actually apply for Bishop Creek on state of California lands. This situation is further complicated because the fecal coliform objective is approximately 5 times more protective of water quality when compared to the E. coli objective. So there are 2 bacteria objectives with 2 different impairment thresholds that apply to California waters, which we must consider for the Vision project. Now, some of you may be wondering why we have such a protective regional objective when compared to the statewide objective to protect human health. Well, the fecal coliform objective really reflects expected bacteria water quality conditions in the region rather than protecting a specific beneficial use of water, while the E. coli objective is actually set at a level which reflects an acceptable risk of getting ill if a person has contact with that water, and obviously that applies to protect the water contact recreation beneficial use. So the differences in water quality protections offered by the statewide E. coli and the regional fecal coliform objective is something that the Water Board is aware of, and staff are actually currently in the midst of a project to evaluate the applicability of each of these objectives to surface waters in Eastern California.
So let's discuss the indicator bacteria data that we have collected from Bishop Creek. There are 3 overarching data sets collected by 3 organizations. The Bishop Paiute tribe actually have the longest running bacteria data set in the project area, and they have been collecting E. coli and total coliform samples from monitoring locations throughout their reservation since approximately the year 2000 up to the present day. Brianna and her team have developed an extensive data set for tribe lands, including monitoring bacteria water quality as Bishop Creek enters and then leaves their property on both of the forks. This data set really is highly useful when trying to determine bacteria problem areas and for long-term trends in bacteria concentrations. So big kudos to the Paiute tribe and to Brianna for this work. The second data set was collected by the Water Board, either by regional monitoring staff or by University of California researchers, as I mentioned previously. The board sampled Bishop Creek for approximately 6 years. We visited 16 stations, collecting both E. coli and fecal coliform, and it was during 2013 and 2014 that we deployed our microbial source tracking effort, which tracks genetic markers for bacteria sources, using a technique known as quantitative polymerase chain reaction, or qPCR. Data collected by the Water Board was actually instrumental in the recommendation to list Bishop Creek as impaired, and the MST data has been key to identify the largest controllable sources of bacteria in the creek. And the third data set I want to mention was collected by the LA Department of Water and Power. They are actually a major grazing leaseholder in the Owens Valley, including in our project area. And as I mentioned, they export Bishop Creek water for municipal purposes to LA. Once DWP were alerted to a bacteria water quality issue in the creek, they mobilized their considerable resources to determine the extent of the issue. They actually have established as many as 27 monitoring locations in the project area, and they sample every week since 2014. So as you might imagine, this data set is considerable, and with over 5 years of data, it's really an important tool for diagnosing bacteria issues in the project area. And as well as this E. coli data, DWP have also deployed their own MST program. They did that between 2014 and 15, although they have not yet shared these data with either the water board or with the tribe. But we are working on that relationship. So next slide, please. So now we know a little bit about the project area and the bacteria objectives that apply in the 3 data sets that exist. And I really wanted to talk quickly about how we assess our surface waters to determine beneficial use support. It's fairly simple. On the face of it, at least, it actually gets incredibly complex and time consuming, but we collect data. We spend a good amount of time making sure these data meet our strict data quality requirements. Once we complete our quality assurance checks, we compile data by analyte and by surface water, and then we compare these data to water quality objectives. Through this comparison, we determine if beneficial uses are supported, in which case the surface water is included on the 305B report, or we determine if beneficial uses are impaired, and we place the water body on the 303D list. If we determine that a water body is impaired for 303D purposes, we then begin a program to address the impairment and improve water quality so beneficial uses are attained. And here in the state of California, our surface water assessments are governed by the water quality control policy for developing California's 303D list, which is also known as the listing policy. And I put a link up here for those interested in checking out these guidelines. So next slide, please. So through our assessment process, we have determined that the water contact recreation and the municipal beneficial uses are not supported in 3 different segments of Bishop Creek. These segments are the Bishop Creek Forks Reach, which flows through the tribe's lands, the Bishop B1 Drain, which is a fairly large irrigation channel that connects the South Fork to the North Fork downstream of the Paiute Reservation, and the Bishop Creek Canal, which is the receiving water, and which conveys water south for agricultural purposes and for municipal purposes in LA. The next slide, please. And because things are easier to see on a map, here's a map. You can see the 3 impaired reaches, Bishop Creek Forks, which begins down in the very left bottom corner, just downstream of the alluvial fan, as the creek reaches the valley floor and enters the first of many grazing allotments. The Forks Reach flows through West Bishop and crosses the Paiute Reservation, which is that yellow area in the center of the map. Again, I want to clarify that this portion of Bishop Creek that flows across Paiute land is not 303D listed, but this section of the creek does also suffer the same elevated fecal indicator bacteria concentrations as the areas upstream and downstream do, and so has been included as impaired on this map. So moving to the east, you can see the Bishop B1 Drain, which flows south to north, just to the right of center on this map. It originates within the Bishop City limits, and the Bishop City is delineated by the blue-green area on this map. And then the Bishop Creek Canal is the red and light blue dashed line flowing north to south along the eastern edge of the city. Thank you, Emma. Next slide, please. So we know where the impairments are, which beneficial uses are not supported, but how do we address these problems? Well, we have 3 main approaches, and these approaches are not necessarily mutually exclusive. They can be deployed synergistically or exclusively, depending on the situation. I think most of us will be familiar with the total maximum daily load, or TMDL, which is a prescriptive approach to dealing with pollutant sources at a load-based level. The next general approach that we have here at the Water Board is through permitting, either through waste discharge requirement, a WDR, or a waiver of discharge, or some other bespoke permitting mechanism at the board's disposal. And the third avenue to improve water quality is a water quality improvement plan, such as a 9-element watershed plan or a vision project, which focus really on collaborative and voluntary actions in a watershed to make water quality improvements. So for the Bishop Creek problem, we identified that a vision project was actually the best tool to get the results that we would like to see in the watershed. Although I will say that this vision project will work synergistically alongside a WDR that the Water Board is also developing, and the whole process will be backstopped by a TMDL. So next slide.
So how will the Vision project deal with the variety of bacteria sources and the fact that there are two different water quality objectives that must be met on California lands? Well, to quickly summarize, we will follow a series of two project phases, each focusing on achieving one of the water quality objectives. One of the reasons we have decided on a phased approach is partly because of some of the restrictions imposed on us by COVID-19, which has meant that we postponed the second round of MST sampling that we planned for this year until next year. And because we already have source tracking data that shows grazing is a predominant source, and because we know that there are proven best management practices for grazing, which are effective at reducing bacteria loads to a surface water, the first phase will focus on grazing sources. It is our hypothesis that by implementing grazing best management practices in the project area, the statewide recreational water quality objective will be met, and the attainment of the REC 1 objective is important in terms of human health protection. The Vision Project Phase 1 will also benefit from the fact that there is a water board permit in development for LA DWP leased grazing lands in the Owens Valley, and this permit will identify best management practices that, when implemented, should achieve Phase 1 of the Vision Project. Phase 2 of the Vision is a little more nuanced, as it will focus on more dispersed bacteria sources, such as human-derived sources from recreation and transient encampments, as well as other controllable sources identified by the second round of MST sampling next year. The goal of Phase 2 is to meet the Lahontan Basin Plan water quality objective, which, remember, is that more protective standard. And finally, for this slide, the Vision Plan document is scheduled to be completed in September 2022, at which time work on Phase 1 will officially begin. Although some landowners in the study area have been proactive and have deployed some grazing management practices already, which is really great to see and is great also in terms of early implementation of the Vision Plan. Before I hand the presentation back to Brianna, I know that there was some interest from this group about the other 303D listings for fecal indicator bacteria in northern Inyo County. Horton Creek and Pine Creek, which are in the Round Valley area to the northwest of Bishop, are also recent additions to the 303D list. Both creeks are impacted by fecal bacteria, and both watersheds are predominantly used for cattle grazing. The impairments to these creeks will not be addressed by the Bishop Creek Vision project, but it is likely that the water board permit for grazing that I was describing previously, the permit for grazing in the Owens Valley, will work to address some of the water quality issues that these creeks are experiencing. So with that, I will now hand the presentation back to Brianna to wrap up with some information about why collaboration has been so important for the Bishop Creek water quality issue. And Brianna, back to you.
Thanks, Ed. That was great. So I just want to share with you folks how important this collaboration has been. Without the close workings that we've been doing with Ed and Cindy and the Lahontan folks, we wouldn't have the data from outside of the reservation. So this has enabled us to coordinate our monitoring resources and look at it on a watershed basis, and not just in our 875 acres or in our nearly 2-mile stretch of Bishop Creek that runs through the reservation. So it's been really important to be able to leverage the resources, whether they're the monitoring resources or, you know, what we could do to implement effective measures to improve the water quality, you know, those being non-point source best management practices. It's been really great for them to understand what's going on upstream and downstream, both with leasees and land managers, and then being able to talk with us about, you know, what they're learning, and so we can better understand it as well. We've also been able to leverage our monetary resources, and that's how we're able to collaborate on the MST project that we've had to push back to next year. It's just been extremely beneficial. I recently went to a TMDL workshop at the National 303D conference, and was learning from states who have similar limited resources like tribes do, and looking at how they manage TMDLs in their state. Right off the bat, I knew that this wasn't something that we were going to be able to effectively do at the tribe. There are no external funding resources available to do this. We have a very small department. It just absolutely wasn't feasible. So it's been really great for us to work together and get this moving forward in a way that hopefully, you know, won't be so cumbersome on the resources, just because we're doing the vision plan as well. So another thing that's come out of it is Cindy Wise, Ed's colleague, has been working on tribal beneficial uses for the state of California. And again, this is just strengthening our relationship with the water board and tribes so that we can better understand each other and, you know, work towards similar goals. So if you're interested in getting more information on the Bishop Creek Vision Project, here are websites and a listserv that you can click on to get email updates as well. I think this recording may be available later, or we can get it to you somehow if you just contact us. And with that, I just want to thank Ed and his colleague Cindy Wise for all that they have done in the collaborations with us. And if anybody has any questions, we're here to answer them. Thanks very much for listening.
Okay, so here we are in real time now. I brought my friends. These are most of the pollutants that are causing our problem, but they're cute, so I brought them with me. We've had a great little chat in the chat box. Does anybody have any questions that they want to bring up verbally?
Brianna, this is Melissa Navis. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Melissa Navis. I'm the tribal liaison for the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest. And my question is, has the designation of tribal beneficial uses by the California Water Board been helpful in terms of protecting water quality?
Okay, this is Cindy. I think she can answer that better.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. We're hoping that it will. We just in September completed the first step in designating those uses for waters in our region. So we added the definitions that have been approved for statewide use. And our next step is going to be specifically designating those uses to waters where they're appropriate. And for the tribal uses, they do need to be approved as appropriate use by the affected tribes. So jury's still out, but we are hoping that it will be a valuable and long overdue tool to protect those tribal uses.
Great, thank you, Cindy.
Thanks for your question, Melissa. Anybody else have a question?
Hey, Brian, it's Rob. Hello. I'm wondering if you might want to talk just a little bit more about how you use the exchange network to manage all those hundreds of thousands of continuous water quality and other data points.
Ooh, nice segue. Good job. Yeah, so the EPA's Exchange Network grant, Bishop has been successful in obtaining that grant, I think back since 2008. And we started that with borrowing or sharing Yurok tribe's water quality database that they called YEDS. And we were going to modify it for Bishop, and of course it'd be called BEDS then. We worked with database developers that were also being paid by Yurok. Then Yurok couldn't pay them. And then it became really hard. I was working weekends and nights with the developer, and it got to the point where people told me nobody in their right mind would be doing what I was doing to make it happen. It just wasn't working. So that was really early in our Exchange Network game, and we quickly learned what we didn't need. It's such a technologic grant. It's basically a technological capacity building grant. It was hard to understand how to actually go about what we thought that we needed. And that was a database to help, you heard us say that we had over 350,000 data points just from our continuous monitoring. That's a lot of data, and Excel would not be able to handle that for very long. So after we had that project basically fail, we knew what we didn't want, which led us to know what we did want. And we ended up using Aquams, which I know a lot of you out there use Aquams as well. It's a great repository for a lot of data, making it very useful just for management and also analysis as well. So that's been a lot of it. We also utilize that money to make all of those, our 4 sites continuous. And instead of, whenever I first started here, we used to go to just the 4 sites, and we would collect bacteria and those 5 physical parameters at each site once a week. And so we basically had 5 data points and a bacteria sample, which we'd get 2 data points from the bacteria sample, being total coliform and E. coli, at 4 sites. So it's at, 20 something data points a week, nowhere near the 350,000 once we got our continuous sites. But, water quality doesn't just happen from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And so we've been able to see, the daily and seasonal changes that happen in our water quality by having those continuous sites out there, which enables us to, if something were to happen, something, more than just the bacteria, if we had a spill, we could easily say, this isn't how our water normally is, and then work towards making it better. Excuse me. So those are kind of the main tools that we've used with the Exchange Network to manage the data so far. Thanks for the question. Does anybody else have a question? Okay, well, I would like to thank my colleagues, Ed and Cindy, and Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board for all of their help. There was a board meeting yesterday that kind of elevated the 303D listing of the creek outside of the reservation. But because we are working together on future studies, we feel like we're working together as much as we possibly could and not having to be held down by a TMDL. We're actually just, on the ground, boots on the ground, working towards getting us back to a better quality water. So thanks very much, guys. And thanks, Rosanna. Thanks, Lori.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Brianna. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ed. Okay.
Bye.
Have a great conference. Everybody drive safe.